You know that feeling when you've just spent, say, 20 minutes endlessly scrolling through your feed? You're looking at everyone's perfect vacation photos, their massive career updates, and then you put your phone down and just feel kind of drained. And if we're being completely honest, somehow less than. Why does seeing other people succeed make us feel so miserable? Well, it's a feeling we rarely admit out loud, but it is incredibly universal. And as we'll see, the anxiety you get from staring at that glowing screen, it actually has roots going back thousands of years. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into the sacred struggle against covetousness and envy. We're going to unpack how a thousands-of-year-old text practically diagnoses our modern smartphone habits, proving that, hey, while our tech has evolved at lightning speed, human nature, yeah, it really hasn't changed a bit. Let's jump right into part one, the original commandment, an ancient boundary. Okay, so take a look at the language here from the book of Exodus. Notice how it's highly external and honestly super specific. Don't take your neighbor's physical possessions, their household, their livestock. The 10th commandment here was essentially a hard boundary line for a functioning society. At this stage, it wasn't really about your internal feelings. It was much more about preventing the physical disruption of a community. It's basically saying, look at what your neighbor has and just don't scheme to make it yours. Pretty straightforward, right? Well, let's see how that actually worked out in part two, a history of envy, humanity's repeated failures. Here in Joshua chapter 7, we get the precise anatomy of a failure. It's a literal step-by-step confession. Just look at the verbs here. First, I saw, then I coveted, and then I took them. And finally, the text notes they were hidden. It traces the exact pipeline of how a visual stimulus, like seeing a beautiful, valuable cloak, morphs into an internal desire, which then just explodes into an illicit physical action. Clearly, that external rule from Exodus, it just wasn't enough to stop the internal impulse. And the crazy thing is, this isn't just an isolated individual problem. It escalates, and it escalates fast. The prophet Micah observes how coveting a neighbor's field inevitably scales up into seizing homes and causing systemic oppression. What starts as just one person looking over a fence at a neighbor's property explodes into something that literally destroys inheritances and households. The source material is showing us something absolutely crucial here. Envy is never victimless. There is always collateral damage in the real world. Which brings us to this incredibly piercing observation. Ecclesiastes brilliantly diagnoses that so much of human ambition, all our toiling, all our striving for achievement, is actually just a symptom of envy. It's just one person trying to outdo another. I mean, think about how relevant that chasing after the wind concept is when we look at modern hustle culture or the relentless climbing of the corporate ladder today. Are we really building something of value, or are we just trying to outpace the guy next to us? That question leads perfectly into part three, a matter of the heart. The internal shift. Okay, this is where the paradigm completely shifts. We move from the external property laws of Exodus, don't take the house, to Jesus's radical new teaching, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The battleground has officially moved inside. It's no longer just about keeping your hands off your neighbor's stuff. It's about taking a really hard look at what your heart truly values. Because if you treasure status or wealth or superiority, your heart becomes permanently anchored to those fleeting things. Jesus explicitly warns his listeners in the book of Luke to guard their internal motives. He says, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. The text here is fundamentally redefining life beyond just accumulating stuff. It's pushing back hard against that old he who dies with the most toys wins mentality that drives so much of our history. It's a huge wake-up call, prompting the audience to realize that an abundance of possessions is actually a completely false metric for a successful life. And the devastating power of this internal condition becomes incredibly clear during the trial of Jesus. The text from Matthew notes that Pilate, a Roman governor, mind you, recognized it was intense self-interest and envy that motivated the crowd. They chose to release Barabbas, not out of some sense of justice, but out of pure envy toward Jesus. It shows us that covetousness isn't always about money. It's about power, influence, and destroying literally anyone who threatens your perceived social standing. So, looking at this timeline, it's quite the journey. We've moved from an ancient external law in Exodus through repeated historical breaches to a profound internal shift with Jesus. Next up, the epistles are going to lead us right up to the glowing screens we're holding in our hands today. Let's dive into part 4, the modern comparison trap, the ongoing battle.
James bluntly connects our internal, unmet desires directly to our external conflicts. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. Let's be real for a second. How many times do we lash out at friends, family, or coworkers, masking our frustration as a completely legitimate argument, when the root cause is actually just plain old envy? We're frustrated because someone else has the recognition or the peace that we desperately desire but totally lack.
The book of Romans defines this constant, gnawing craving for earthly validation as the flesh. The source text starkly contrasts this earthly mindset, which it bluntly says brings death and is hostile to God, against the life and peace found in a mind governed by the Spirit. So it's framing envy and covetousness not just as a bad mood you can shake off, but as an entire psychological and spiritual operating system that is fundamentally opposed to human flourishing. And Colossians takes it a step further, elevating the severity of this issue to its absolute peak. It equates covetousness not just with a bad habit, but with literal idolatry that must be put to death. Wow. When we obsess over what others have, we are essentially worshiping those things. We make idols out of other people's careers, their relationships, their curated lifestyles, and we completely sacrifice our own peace of mind at the altar of comparison.
Let's bring this all home in Part 5, the ultimate invitation, facing our modern reality.
When we look at the modern symptoms derived from our source material today, man, it hits close to home. Doom scrolling, envying your friends' lifestyles, harboring silent resentment, buying things you definitely can't afford just to keep up appearances, believing your life isn't enough, or, even worse, secretly rejoicing when someone else experiences a setback. If you felt literally any of these, you realize human nature hasn't changed at all. We are living out the exact same struggles recorded in Exodus, Micah, and James. We just happen to have better Wi-Fi. Yet after outlining this massive, heavy, seemingly inescapable human flaw, the source material offers a really surprising conclusion. Even if your heart is utterly consumed by this toxic comparison trap, go to church anyway. The text implies that community and spiritual grounding aren't some exclusive club reserved only for those who have totally conquered their desires. No, they were actually proposed as the remedy for those infected with this very modern disease. In a world totally obsessed with keeping up appearances, with curating the absolute perfect digital life, and constantly measuring our messy behind-the-scenes reality against everyone else's polished highlight reel, is this ancient shift of the heart exactly what we need? Can recognizing the sheer futility of this chasing after the wind finally set us free to find real peace? It's a profound question to sit with, especially the next time you feel that familiar urge to just endlessly scroll.